Okay, as a servant. Okay. ARTLIGHT, take 3.
Alright, this is ARTLIGHT by C.A.A.C. I am Mariah Guyot, and this is
Shamika Patil. We're both seniors studying architecture in the Illinois School of Architecture at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign.
Where are you from, and how has that influenced how you create?
Okay, so I'm originally from India. Like I was born in India in the state of Karnataka, and then my family moved to the US when I was about 3 years old. But yeah, but for most of my life I grew up in America. I grew up in a northwest Chicago suburb. We went back to India fairly regularly, and we had a really strong connection with our family there. I would say that that kind of balance between growing up in the Western world, growing up in like a fairly well-off suburb versus like having my history and like my family back in India, I think that kind of balance between the worlds really defined a lot of my identity, kind of always trying to balance the dichotomy of myself. And I think that brings itself into my design thinking and the way I approach architecture, because I think I try at least to place some emphasis on like cultural values and things of that sort, as well as like the modern world. And I think just having that kind of dual understanding.
I feel like I noticed that in your design, especially while we were in Spain, and you're really like thinking about Catalan culture when you design buildings, because you're aware of like these people are very attached to their culture and their distinction between Spaniards and Catalonians.
I would definitely say the fact that we both got to study abroad in Barcelona our junior year was like such an amazing experience. Like I don't have especially going from Barcelona and coming back to the States like during a pandemic and everything just makes it feel like it was not real, like it was some kind of dream that I had, and the only proof that we actually went is like maybe the photos we took, the sketches we did, but otherwise I could like very easily convince myself that wasn't real, because like it was really such an amazing experience.
I just remembered a story that you told me, a family history story that you told me while we were in Spain, and you talked about how the women in your family have typically been really talented artistically, and each had like a different specialty, and you felt this pressure and expectation to continue the trend.
The way that I see, especially my mom kind of blows my mind, because she's able to be creative in so many different realms. Like she does oil painting, she does embroidery, she can like sew really well. Like it's like anything she wants to do, I could imagine her like picking it up and like learning how to do it and then just starting, especially anything creative. So I think in that sense that's kind of rubbed off on me a little bit, because in architecture it's so easy to think about architecture as just buildings. It's so easy to think about it as like, okay, we're designing a building for the people inside the building, so we'll think about the people, we'll think about their needs and what kind of spaces they need, and okay, now from there, what's our floor-to-floor height, what's the section gonna look like, what's the plan gonna look like. It's so easy to think in that way, but I think the part of architecture and the architectural process that's most intriguing to me is like when you're able to bring in other fields of knowledge.
This family influence, as well as the toothpick bridge and how enthralling that was, how do you think that's translated into your projects today? And could you tell us about your projects today?
Yeah, my most current project that we're working on right now, we're both working on designing a community center in Champaign. The first one we kind of did was coming up with 3 different concepts for what kind of defines a community, what defines a community center. And for me, like, I took a look at like Champaign's history, Champaign's demographics, things like that, and it really struck me that like Champaign is in many ways a community of communities.
I remember you used that in your
yeah,
presentation.
Yeah, that was kind of the driving phrase for my 3 concepts.
Yeah.
I really wanted to treat the community center as like a place that all of those communities could come together. So I had this idea of raising my building up off of the ground to give as much of the site back to nature, leave as much of the ground untouched. I was really intrigued by Carol Ross Barney. She's an architect who designed the Champaign Public Library. And once I read a bit more about Carol Ross Barney, she has this kind of thinking about architecture as healing the earth. And so I kind of took that as my idea in raising the building off the ground as much as possible.
Considering where you are now, who would you like to thank?
A lot of people. I feel like there's no way I would have been able to do everything I've been able to do and learn as much as I have without like so many people in my life. I mean, obviously my parents were super influential and super supportive of me throughout my life, so they're the first and foremost people I have to thank. I have to thank my brother because he's also really supportive of me, and when I start like freaking out and everything, he can be really helpful for that as well. I have to thank like my really close friends back home. They're like my friends from high school and middle school. Like, I would not be the person I am at all without them. They've shaped who I am in a way that can't like even be described in words. And then of course my like architecture friends here, because I think architecture is such a education that's dependent on your peers.
It's very social.
It's a very social field, and like everyone's so close to one another, and there's such a sense of camaraderie. So I mean, you, Owen, like other people from architecture.
What advice would you give people joining the field for the first time?
I would say it's a really daunting field. It doesn't seem as daunting when you decide to do architecture. Like once you start architecture, especially as a freshman, it can seem like such a daunting learning curve. It can seem really scary, but I would say the best advice that I could give anyone who wants to start their education in architecture would be, don't be afraid to like ask questions. Questions are probably, ask questions to your professors, ask questions to your peers, ask questions to upperclassmen.
Yes.
Like there's always people who are willing to help you, especially if they've been in architecture themselves. They understand what you're going through. And then I guess the other thing I would say is, don't be shy. Be like one of our reviewers said, be more radical. Like that's okay. Like yeah, we should be. Like I feel like a lot of my designs early on were really safe, and I was like afraid to kind of push the envelope, and I didn't know there was so much more you could do. So I would say be confident in yourself and don't be afraid to try something that seems impossible.